been on air doing that. Maybe he's not quite getting the attention that deserves. But winning your group in this, you know, jokes about America's Grandmasters side. These are very, very good Hearthstone players. And to 2-0 them 4 weeks in a row is pretty spectacular. Sotto's trying so hard not to make an America's Hearthstone player joke right now.
I mean, yeah. You do have to try very hard to dodge the elephant in the room when you come on the America's broadcast, don't you?
I don't know. I haven't seen any elephants in these rooms at all. All I've seen is LX, and they're getting reworked.
And hats and mattresses and coats and hat stands and
drumsticks.
Various other drumsticks, yeah, all sorts of things.
Guitar.
Blink Fox.
There's a game going on, Sotto. Could you concentrate on the Hearthstone, please?
I'm sorry.
A very serious region and broadcast.
I'm sorry.
Nice looking hand from McBanterFace because it has an Octobot in it and a lot of cheap things. That's a nice looking hand, especially against the Paladin. He's actually going to have a chance to play for some tempo. And Fled, on the other hand, has forgotten to get his 1-drops. So this could be interesting very quickly.
I mean, do you actually want a hand other than this? Like, this is just Banana Man into Banana Man. He turned down Minerva McGonagall into Banana Man into Banana Man. But he's going to go with the Banana Man curve anyway, and I think just delaying the proc on the Octobot for 1 additional turn makes sense. Plus, of course, he is then getting a significant buff on Minerva in hand, which is a very big deal overall. So I like this curve, and honestly, like, do you need to curve out 1, 2, 3 with this deck? Because I feel like this is the power curve with Paladin, is get the hand buffs and then start playing Divine Shields as quickly as you can, and that's exactly what this hand does.
Yeah, and he's scared with McBanterFace into proccing his own Octo to get on. Well, not scared him, but he's made him do it to speed up the game. Goody 2 shields would be a problem as well. But he's going to get quite a way behind on this board, though, before he fights back with the bananas.
True.
Like a rogue amount behind. And with that removal in hand from McBanterFace, this could get pretty scary pretty fast. Just forget all talk of combos. This is could be just an old-fashioned beating.
Yeah, it could indeed, and I think this is the way that Rogue will pick up a win in this series if it's going to. You can line this up into basically any of the matchups. If this was Face Hunter, this is the start McBanterFace would want, right? Early Octobot, Prize Plunderer, and a Gordon, just to be able to either proc the Octobot or to snipe down some one health minions on the other side. If it's a Paladin, this is the exact start he wants because of what we're seeing. The Paladins are just a little bit slow to get cooking, and this has been the story. If you want to go back to the equivalent matchup in the previous metagame, there's Tempo Rogue versus Libram Paladin, right? And this was the same deal, is that Octobot came down, they had 3 or 4 minions in play before Paladin had really done anything, and then the game could snowball from there. Obviously, this version of Rogue, not as good as closing on that strategy as the old Tempo Rogue was. They will lose that grip on tempo at some point, and that's where the window for Fled will appear. But so far, this is a great start for McBanterFace.
Yep, and he has got the Foxy Fraud, which I know you talk about Foxy a lot, but this is a matchup where you want it. You want some even more tempo on your side. It's not so good in the combo build, although I do feel with the rise of the neophytes that we might see Foxy's return yet. But it's very good in this exact situation right now. Of course, Samuro is waiting somewhere. I'm just going to check it is actually in the list. It should be. Yes, it is. I can see reasons to take it out, but it is still there.
And I think that's why we're seeing Fled just divert to a slightly larger minion here. Obviously, the greed from the other Banana Man would have been ideal with the hand that he had. I think if he'd have had Righteous Protector in hand already, even maybe would have seen that gone for a little bit earlier. But instead, he's going for a slightly bigger minion, slightly harder minion to take down. But he does now have buffed up Moonfang to land on the following turn, which I'm sure he is very interested in. Anta tests for Oh My Yogg, does not get yogged, so now he knows next card is Pony card for the opponent, so he will probably choose to let this go.
Yep, he's got to work the pros and cons, but a dagger seems pretty useful, honestly. Just if you're not allowed to play another card as a 3/2, a 1/2 dagger is okay right now.
Yeah, dagger saves a Divine Shield here even, right? You can just bump with the 1/1 and the dagger, maybe. The 1/1 Divine Shield and the dagger just to fully take board. You could always just choose to completely ignore the minion as well and just straight up go face, deal with it next turn. It's valid as well, but I think because the trade's so efficient, you might as well do it.
Yeah, I think you want to leave Fled with very little on board, because if you do get Samaroed, this game resets in a hurry and you die very fast while you're trying to scramble a combo of some sort together.
This is the card that slightly confused me looking at this deck from Fled. Like, obviously, initial reaction, the whole lineup confused me because
Sure.
look at it. Look at the actual state of it. But then as the tournament went on, it started to become more and more obvious that actually it was just fairly well planned out. He had a good idea. It was working. He had the read. He had the target. But for me, the Varian always has been and always will be too slow in this deck, and I don't think there is a viable reason for that card to be in there. We have seen it a couple of times be particularly impactful, but I think it got cut from this list even when it was being played a lot on ladder. It got cut from this list very, very quickly, and I was a little surprised to see it coming back out.
I face it quite a lot in the very deepest, darkest dumps that you've ever seen on the America server. But that's
Your Honor, no further questions. I rest my case.
Yeah, exactly. No, I'm sort of agreeing with you. I just don't want to. I know there'll be people out there in that dumpster with me who are going, "This Sottle doesn't know what he's talking about. I see Varian all the time." Yeah, welcome.
And those people in the absolute dumpster of America's ladder next season will be your new GMs. So look forward to that.
Wow! Why did I set him up so easily? Lesson learned. Never have Sottle on the broadcast ever.
Lesson learned.
That's the takeaway.
Just don't know me. You shouldn't know me. That's your fatal flaw.
It depends. If you do it on turn 5 and you've got enough elementals, you can have a go.
That's fair, yeah. Or of course, if you're Edge.
Yep, absolutely. That'd be a great sub-emote, actually. I'll consider that. Anyway, moving swiftly on, McBanterFace is starting to run out of steam. The defense is getting organized, but 14 is a low enough health total that the combo becomes not a combo, but just more of I cast some garots.
Yes. Yeah, even sometimes just, spell damage, spell damage, spell damage, and 2 garots. Oh, that killed you. Cool, I didn't even have to draw any cards. Nice, we got there.
Yeah.
Not much happened.
And then if you throw in a secret passage or two, which I love to rant about, I haven't seen anyone do it yet, even though I seem to do it a lot when I play this deck. Just secret passage into cast the 1-mana bleeds, or whatever they're called. And that quite often gets it done as well.
I'm not sure if you were there at the time, but we had a practice game. It's the practice game that I've most wanted to win in my entire life in preparation for GM, where we were testing Garrote Rogue versus Aggro Druid. And I set up an out where I had the bleeds in my deck and I Incanters flowed them to set up being able to secret passage through a neophyte and still be able to cast bleeds from hand to kill. And I ended up 1 damage off lethal and I was so annoyed. I played that game so well, I deserved the win, but it didn't happen.
I didn't see it and I would have been happy on both counts. A, that you did the thing that I always talk about, and B, that you lost.
Yeah.
It just sounds perfect. Anyway, McBanterFace now has to piece together some way of not winning the game, and we have to memorize the board, because Fled, yesterday, played the left-hand pack mule.
What a fool. Did he wave goodbye to the broadcasters?
He didn't do the Monsanto wave, no.
Spell damage being used for tempo here from Banter, I think quite clearly illustrating what we've seen and what we've been talking about the entire game, that he is just focused on winning board. This is absolutely what he should be doing. It's exactly what his hand has supported doing since that early Octobot stuck to the board.
And this is the awkward turn. This is what you've been talking about with Varian. It's like, it's just that half a turn too slow.
Yeah,
it's a full turn too slow right now, but I like to average things out. It's half a turn too slow on average. And what do? This is a horrible turn. Unknown. I've never seen that on the back of it before. It says unknown in black letters.
Sure does.
What's going on?
And even the Moonfang has ended up looking a little bit too slow this game, right? Even though it's absolutely massive, there just hasn't really been the turn for Fled to feel like it could come down. I think, maybe there was some merit at some point to just get it down and threaten the idea of Battlemaster in hand. But if I remember rightly, this is a 1 Battlemaster list from Fled, right? So I don't think McBanterFace would even necessarily take that bait if you threw it down and trade a lot of resources into it. He probably would just end up ignoring it.
Yeah, it is a one Battlemaster list. I looked while you're doing that. It might be a function of the fact he didn't get a one drop. I was mocked slightly at the start, probably rightfully so for suggesting that, but not having the one at the start meant that he lost the board quicker than he would have if he'd curved a little bit more curvily.
Well, Neil, joke's on you.
Time to Moonfang.
Because now I'm going to mock you further. Like, which one drop could he have played on curve that actually would have helped him out in the situation that came up? Because your one drops in this deck are 1/1s, right? Like, their basis, the one drops in this deck either draw cards in the case of Knight, or they're tools to be buffed later in Righteous Protector. Playing a 1/1 into your opponent going Coin Octobot doesn't help you out, does it? It just saves your opponent 1 mana to proc their Octobot.
Does it? Because they have to use that 1 mana anyway. I guess it could do, because obviously then you play 0 mana to play your card. But looking at the Goody 2 shields on the left that was in the opening hand is where I'm at with this.
True, yeah.
The victory is...
He just never got played. Fled gives it up, and that's a huge win from McBanterFace, getting anything through at all in this matchup, and taking a 1-0 lead probably now makes him favourite to find a way to get this done.
And look at that complete lack of banter in and around his face. I still cannot believe it. It's just not there. There's just no banter. I don't understand what the name is about. But what I do understand is that he's a very, very solid player. A real grinder right out of that Tyler mold, I would say. Just, hundreds and hundreds of games every week, thousands of games on ladder, just getting real knowledge bases under his belt. I've watched his stream on a few occasions, and he is a very thoughtful player. He's one of those people who does vocalize a lot of the thought process, and it's always interesting to see the kind of things that are going through. And I think we saw a bit of that this season on this particular deck, right? As Derek said in top 5, bottom 5, I'm not here to read nerd, get on the list. He did put out a very intricate description of what went wrong with one of the most difficult rogue turns that we've seen across all 3 regions this season, which just go to show his knowledge base with the deck, right? Even if it takes you 15, 20 minutes of analysis to get to that point, just the fact that he could get to that point showed that he had a depth of knowledge about the deck. And I think you saw there another demonstration of people that understand that sometimes the deck's just budget tempo rogue from last season, and that's just kind of what you go with. And in that particular matchup, I think he executed on it perfectly.
Yep, and it's got less and less like that. So finding those spots have become harder and harder, so it's more and more impressive when they turn up. That one was fairly straightforward. Like, I spotted it, which means it's fairly straightforward. With the Mancrix and with the Kazakus not living together in the same build anymore, something I still don't quite understand. It is a lot harder to make those tempo pushes, but he executed that very nicely. But now the Demon Hunter enters the fray. And one of the nice things about this lineup from Fled is whatever it's targeting, you don't have to ban this Demon Hunter, because I don't like banning this deck, because I think it is overhyped. I don't think it's bad. I think it's overhyped.
Interesting. I've come around a little bit to this. Well, I suppose come around to this deck isn't the right way of putting it. I've come around to Brute Demon Hunter now that this is Brute Demon Hunter, I guess is the right way to phrase it. I hated Brute Demon Hunter. I thought it was a bad deck. I thought that the community was just having a collective delusion that this deck was playable, and then it just lasted way longer than I expected it to. But I think this deck has improved my standing with it, and as I put more and more time into it, I do sort of start getting rewards out of it. But I understand the caution in the way that this metagame has developed, right? Because it seems like essentially every 24 to 48 hours there's a new meta breaker that only loses if you throw, right? Like, anyone who has ever lost a game with this deck is just throwing the game. It's too big brain for you. You don't understand. We've heard that over and over again with various different decks. The only one that it was actually true of, if you're curious, was D6.
Oh no!
Just so we actually
okay, good.
Out there.
I thought you were going to mention Patron Warrior then for a moment, but as always, I mentioned it first.
Neil 1,
right.
Sottle 0. Yep. Okay.
Yeah, I know. Sottle loves that I point out that he points out Patron Warrior things. I possibly played this matchup from the Demon Hunter side more than anybody in the world. That may have changed, as McBanterFace may have played it all last night, but in that dark dumpster, I've played hundreds of games of this Demon Hunter, and everybody plays Secret Paladin.
Sorry, I'm just giggling at myself because for some inexplicable reason, I did actually write that down as I said I was going to make a note of it. I don't know why. That was entirely unnecessary for the sake of the bit. But I do just have Neil 1, Sottle 0 now written on a pad of paper next to me. No idea why.
I think that comes from when we were live in studios back in the...
And you'd have to write it down to sell the bit in that case, yeah.
And you could prove that you wrote it down later on in case it came back later to bite you. So now you can wave it at the camera and say that's why you did it later. So the problem for the Demon Hunter in this matchup, I did it yesterday, but I'm going to go through it again today as we have more viewers most likely because, you know, it's finals day.
Because I'm here. Oh, no, okay.
And the waves get bigger and bigger, as you saw in the last game. So as you're using up your limited removal as the Demon Hunter, it's not like clearing off a load of Priest minions where you clear them up and then the same minions come back and you clear them up again. You clear up the first wave and the next wave is just bigger stuff and the pressure just becomes insurmountable so quickly.
Yes, absolutely. If anything, this is the one deck in the lineup that perhaps isn't as miserable against Divine Shields because Immolation Aura is kind of a natural Divine Shield buster. If you get a Moarg Divine Shield or a Spell Damage Divine Shield, the first one cleans up the shield, then the second hit usually does enough damage to clear up the health because generally Divine Shield minions have low health to compensate for the fact that they have Divine Shield. So it's the one that can kind of deal with stuff, but I think your description of just the endless waves of threats is bang on the money.
It's so annoying because you go, yeah, the thing you just said, oh, I got rid of your goody two shields, both of them, and your stupid little taunt thing. And then you go, okay, well, here's some stuff. It's just paladin stuff with numbers on it, and that's all it is. It's garbage, but it's impossible to get rid of. And then there's Moonfang, and nobody knows how it works with Moargs, ever. we used to know, and we no longer have a clue, because it seems to have changed.
It did, yeah.
Basically, the Moarg can, in some circumstances that we thought we knew, override the Moonfang ability because the Moarg just kills it.
Yes.
But those conditions don't seem to be static, so we won't go into it too much.
Yes. There was once upon a time where I would have proudly and confidently explained all possible iterations of that interaction, but I do think somewhere along the line something's got in the code and it's changed a little bit, so now I'm team wait and see.
Cool. I will press you on it if one game happens that a Moarg's in one hand and a Moonfang's in another, and then it might be important.
It might be important, yeah. I think actually, if anything, the fact that it's changed makes it simpler, and it's always Moarg dominance now, from what my understanding is.
That would be my guess too. Like, it used to be turn dependent, blah, blah. Anyway, I told you I wouldn't lead you down that rabbit hole and then led you down it, which is what TJ does to me every day. So once again, he's taught me well. Double. Possibly triple. Doesn't hit it.
Doesn't hit it, no. Sequencing was very nice, though. I think in the end there is an acrobatics buff to still go off here, which I'm not sure if Banter gave himself enough time to react to it or whether that was even needed. But he had 1 mana to spend, so he spent that on Philosophy. Then he spent a 0 mana Illidari Studies, which would have meant if another Philosophy appeared off that, he would have had 0 mana discount by 1 mana, so he would have been able to cheat out the final Philosophy in the end as well to get another Brute down. So sequencing all looked very clean to me.
You can tell someone's playing this deck well as opposed to me, because their hand is always full of card draw spells and not all the rubbish, because they play the rubbish and get rid of it. When I play it, all the rubbish is in my hand and I have no card draws left, and there's a completed quest and there's a Kurtrus somewhere in my deck, or I've burned it.
The Kurtrus somewhere in your deck part, I definitely believe. That's a Lorinda line if I've ever heard.
Just appears.
Yeah.
Then you have to draw it. It just gets out of hand. Talking of out of hand, though, Fled's actually struggling here.
He is, absolutely. Overwrite second charge of Tusk Piercer with Tusk Piercer again. He can now attack, set up the cycle again for next turn. This final Brute on the right is getting nice and cheap here.
Yep.
He's going to cycle the Viper. It's an interesting decision of itself, because obviously you know you're curving into the Hammer of the Naru turn now for your opponent, so Viper can be somewhat relevant in this matchup.
And it could be, obviously, with both of them being in hand. Why don't people play 2 peddlers, Sottle? Help me. What obvious thing am I missing?
Because they suck and you'd have to cut something else for them. Why do you want to play 2?
Because sometimes you just want to play a peddler on the board and hit people, and sometimes you don't want to spend a mana putting it back in your deck so you can redraw it as well.
I don't think you ever want to do that first thing until you get to the very bottom of your deck and you've exhausted all other win conditions. So I think that's probably the point that we're going to disagree on if you think you want to put another one in the deck. But I think the more pertinent question is, you'd have to cut a card to get another one in there. So tell me which card you'd cut first and foremost.
Let me have a look through the deck. Immolation Aura. The first.
No. At that point, we might as well just go back to playing Brute Demon Hunter and have no removal in our deck.
Well, like APAC kind of half did all this
kind of.
with their weird builds.
Kind of, you're not
Sigil
wrong.
Runner's got Outcast, which just makes your other stuff worse as well. Your double jumps become grim. But you only ever want to hit Spectral Sight with them.
Not too heavy.
Alright, well, Fled has found a way to get rid of most of the stuff and put up a wall. But he's not supposed to be putting up a wall, he's supposed to be hitting people in the face, so more of that required.
Yeah, he is somewhat successfully doing that as well. Like, quietly, he has maneuvered Banter down to 14. The problem is that Banter's just in business here in terms of the card draw that he has access to now, with Kurtrus having been played safely. He did also deliberately engineer a situation on the previous turn where he philosophied a Moog to give himself this flexibility now with spell damage, Fell Screen Blast. He has ways to do this, but this is, when I talk about how Divine Shields aren't necessarily as hard to remove for this deck as some others in Banter's lineup, this is where the problem can come from, because obviously Divine Shields mean that healing does not go off if it hits a Divine Shield and does 0 damage. So this is where it can be somewhat annoying, and these big rebound turns where you're trying to use Fell Screen Blast to stabilize.
Just want to point out before it all vanishes, and doesn't matter, that Fled's positioning has just been nice throughout this. Ending up with the Divine Shield in the middle is, for instance, tidy, in case he wants to play more things.
He did start the turn with 2 Divine Shields as well, but yes, the one on the right having Taunt means that that situation eventually materializes over time.
Right, 1 or 2 turns left, 5 cards left from McBanterFace. While we've been talking about, can Fled get through, can they move the board? We've been concentrating on the board. The off-board stuff is nearly done for McBanterFace.
And that is persistent spell damage sticking to the board. This is not Talented Arcanist. You can ignore a Talented Arcanist. Where's
he hasn't got the lifesteal. He'll get it.
You just see the pink card. You're like, oh, he's dead.
Yep. Works for everyone else. These secrets are so, not so much on turn 8, but these secrets are so irritating, because both of them hurt you.
They are. You're not wrong.
Just a perfect combo. Hunter used to have a combo of secrets as well that was, I can't remember what it was now, where you just had to take a guess, and you're in this situation sometimes against Paladin now where you just have to guess and hope it's okay.
One card remaining. Do you know what this last card is? I confess
I don't. There's 27 cards on the list,
okay.
I'm afraid. I have got it open, but it's not very helpful.
Okay.
We've had mules have been played.
Ah, yes, of course. So here's the motley crew, the Suicide Squad push, as Raven was referring to, where all these minions get down to 0. You can just start throwing them out on the board, but it doesn't really matter. It was kind of a formality there yet again, because honestly, that played out fairly similarly in a weird way to the road game that we just saw, right? Where Banter just got ahead on tempo early. Obviously, this deck does it in a very different way by landing those big brutes early on, but it's still just a similar story, Like, he picked apart a couple of early minions, and then boom, that turn appeared, and from that point, he was just ahead on board because he leveraged that one turn into a clear. He then leveraged that clear into an empty board to play Kurtrus on, and from that point, Fled was just playing catch-up.
And that leaves me in one heck of a paradox now, because I want Fled to do well this week because he's the one who brought the different lineup. but he's against the handlock, and Sottle was saying that the handlock might be the weak point, and I don't want Sottle to be right, so I'm all confused. I don't know what I want to happen anymore. But here it is. Here is the handlock build. All the Anetheron builds got wiped out. Not necessarily because of the build, as it happens, sometimes because of the piloting, but we are down to the handlocks of normalness again now, with the threat build being the primary one this time around.
Yeah, and there's a few other things at stake here as well, because as I mentioned, Fled was my pick for Americas. If I get Fled right, I'm 3 for 3 on the week. However, if I get Fled wrong and instead McBanterFace wins, that means I'm only tied for victory this week alongside Raven, who also would have picked 2 out of 3 successfully. So there is a lot at stake on the line for me as well, but I think far more at stake for these players.
Yes.
I think MC McBanterFace will be trying to make this one a sprint as opposed to a canter race, and trying to make it as quick as possible. Please stop me before I actually just start straight up freestyling on the broadcast. No one wants.
No, I've been waiting for it for years because I am ready.
Yeah.
One day, it's going to happen. I'll probably be fired the next day, but it'll be really good.
Admirable bottled it once. We were going to do it in like the opening turns of a Warrior Mirror, and he bottled it. He wouldn't do it with me.
Oh no.
Yeah.
That's something I would have paid to see.
Yeah.
Right, opening hands. Fled has got... I was thinking, this is a funny rogue hand. Why is there an infestation in it? Yep, Fled has got Hunter. That's why, Neil. Well done. But he has got an amazing opener hand. This is absolutely perfect. Solrend is a long, long way away when you get this opener as a Hunter.
It is. But I do fear for Fled a little bit here, because I think if anything for the Warlock, this is probably the best matchup that it has. I set that up at the beginning as well, where I was asking you like whether you agreed with that if there was any weakness in the series for Fled, it might be that the Hunter gets 3-0'd. Well, he's in a much, much worse position than that going into this game with the Hunter. But going way back now, like I'll admit, I haven't tested this matchup firsthand for quite some time. But as I was playing Handlock a few weeks ago early on in the meta, Face Hunter was extremely common on the other side at the time, and it just felt like Solrend was a free win button on so many occasions, because I think Face Hunter really doesn't have the tools to push back against a big bristleback scavenger turn if you can get there.
Right,
and obviously Solrend is the biggest card in your deck to getting to that point, because you don't want to be tapping and backfiring against Hunter as much as possible, right? You would love to use that Solrend to just delete your deck as opposed to drawing cards.
Lots of options here for Fled. Before that happened, I think he was going to coin Mankrik so he could then Infestation Neophyte going into the Solrend turn. But picking up the Initiate's given him a heck of a lot more to look at, and things are a lot more natural than they would have been the other way now.
Yeah, this now gives him Cub Neophyte at the very least going into the next turn, because I do agree you still want that Neophyte to land going into the next turn and try and delay that damage as much as possible. That makes life interesting now.
The second one, obviously, not quite doing what my excitement might lead you to believe, because you can still Solrend for 5, because it is only 1 Neophyte and 1. They're not going to be cumulative. Like, all your spells cosplay, not like, what are they called? Watch posts. Might make things interesting.
True.
They're not cumulative, that's the phrase. I learned some words today. And now, I guess you have to put the brakes on and say, Solrend me.
Do you, though?
4, 5,
What do the brakes look like, is my question.
I guess you can play a Wrangler, can't you, and just get yourself some Rhinos.
That's what I mean, right? Because, again, we're caster vision here, right? We know that the Neophyte worked. We know that the dynamic is kind of what Fled's hoping it is that he's blocked a Solrend on the other side. But actually, even then, that's not the right way to put it. Because what Fled hopes the dynamic is that Solrend are the last 2 cards in McBanterFace's deck, and he doesn't have to play around them. So I think by playing Wrangler here, he gets the good news that A, he gets to progress his quest, which is draw Moonfang, which is a very annoying card in every matchup. But this has massive, massive upside if the opponent just doesn't have a Solrend in their hand, right? Just by playing an extra minion on board, getting extra pressure.
Yeah, and Darrett made the point that in this particular matchup, in all of the matchups it's good, but in this particular matchup, it eats so much removal to kill a Moonfang. It's just so annoying.
It's also that common thread that like the decks that Moonfang's in this lineup all have ways to just buff it as well. Like we saw Banana Man buffing Moonfang even though it wasn't effective in the Paladin. We see the Warsong Wrangler interaction with Moonfang now as well. I'm sure, again, Raven is delighted watching this because Moonfang in Hunter is something that he has been crying about for quite some time. But then at one point he insisted that Cairn Bloodhoof in Hunter was the way forward. So what does he know about anything?
I mean, at one point perhaps it was, but that point is not now. The only point that matters is the point you get for winning a Hearthstone match.
I love how that bit is over with no one except you and TJ, but neither of you care. You just keep on doing it. It's wonderful, and I respect it so deeply.
Thank you. It's the best bit ever.
Yeah.
And it's true. I think if you polled all of our viewers from the 3 regions, the Americas region would know how the structure works better than any others.
That's probably true, yeah, to be fair to you.
So I've done my job correctly and efficiently.
Yeah, good job.
Said no one ever. There is lethal technically available for Fled next turn as things stand if McBanterFace forgets to have a turn.
It's quite easy to have a turn. Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say it's a pretty miserable thing you have to do to have any turn and actually play around lethal on this particular turn from Banterface.
A lot of damage incoming though.
It is. Huge chunk of Moonfang going face here.
One of the pleasant things about Hunter, okay, yes, there are spells in the deck he would like to be able to cast right now, but having minions in your deck just makes neophytes seem so, like, awful. It's so pleasant to just play an 8-4 and say you can't deal with this.
Yes, it is.
It's not an 8-4, it's an 8-16 or something.
Right, yes.
The other thing when you play something like Moonfang is your opponent has to constantly make sure they get all the interactions right. Like, does the Bristleback get me health if it kills it? Does it give me 1?
Yeah,
it asks all sorts of annoying questions.
Mm-hmm. But looking at the hand, I don't see any even vaguely reasonable way to plan to be interacting with this Moonfang. So Baron Scavenger, I think, is the best tool that he has available, and he has both of them, which is a very, very big deal. The problem now does come from healing, which he can now get with the double discount. That's an incredible hand to get the double discount on, by the way. Abusing the slight gap in the code, shall we say, currently with the Baron Scavenger to actually get them down to 0. But the fact he can get Bloodshard down to 2 and the double Bristlebacks down to 0 basically give him the only hand that could feasibly even have a chance against this.
Yep, back up to... It's only 13, actually.
It is only 13, yeah, but it's
he has set up lethal coming back the other way, which is pretty relevant.
It's an enormous board. Nine going face.
Fled stated yesterday.
But
so I think this
lethal.
Yeah, it's pretty much over for Fled almost. But he stated yesterday that was the biggest match apart from the qualifiers of his life, and I think he's showing that today in his sort of laid back by his standards attitude. He's won the one he wanted to win.
Ooh, is this the right way of doing this? Gets his other aim shot this way. He could have got Mancrick this way as well, which I suppose I am forgetting about. That's fair. But I was considering just the aim shot here on the board, and then the hero power going through to face, and then you'd still have double quick shot hero power again available next turn. Doing it this way, he has aim shot and then a 6 damage hero power, so that's 9, that's 12, 15 from the 2 quick shots going alongside that with 1 mana to spare. But I guess his out in his mind gave him the option of just getting Mancrick immediately for 3 more damage right there and then.
Yes.
But then he would also be missing this aim shot in hand, right? Because he wouldn't have drawn the other aim shot that he used on that turn. So pretty close, I think, in the end.
Has now allowed McBanterFace to stabilise, obviously. Well, Fled has the turn before that McBanterFace had that challenged Fled's board has allowed him to stabilise enough.
And in the end, was a
McBanterFace-
formality. Made a formality by the Colt Nia fight coming down in the end, which would have ripped away basically any and all outs that Fled had. But I would have been interested to rewind and look at those last 2 turns again after the huge board came down from Banter, because I'm not sure if the Barrett Kodo Bane was optimal there, even if Mancrit came out, to be perfectly honest, in that spot. So I think that one would need another look taken at it. But in the end, I suppose a slightly disappointing end to our hero. This is certainly not how you make a Hollywood blockbuster. This would not gross several hundred million on opening weekend if you set it all up, get to the final act, and then the hero falls. Not even in the final act. He fell in Act 2. He didn't even make it to the final showdown with the last villain.
It did occur to me, yes.
What kind of script writers do you have over here in the Americas region, Lorinda?
Setting up a storyline where you lose 7 times out of 8
Yes!
might not have been our finest plan ever. But that's how we roll here in Americas. We don't tell us the odds, we just go for it. We don't understand numbers and things like that. You do it once, and what happens, happens. And that's how
Yes,
Americas
indeed.
goes. Fled, though, a comfortable man, but McBanterFace once again with this methodical victory. All 3 games, put minions on the board and win with them. Like, 3 decks that aren't necessarily associated with doing that. All 3 games, he just tempoed his opponent down, and that's how you deal with aggro at the moment with the lineups available.
Yeah, rough one for Fled to take. Again, I think the lineup needs commending. I think it was a bold risk. I think it was a risk that gave us a lot of entertainment. It's a risk that I think probably saved the sanity of yourself and TJ and most of the America's viewers as well, of not just having to see the same matchups pan out over and over again. But I think also fittingly, we have now got to the point, to the expected outcome at the end, which is, you know,